Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching India Tonight with me and my colleague Nivendhana Prabhu is here as well with me in our Delhi studios. You are watching India Tonight, a show that deep dives into the biggest stories that we're following from the world of business, politics, finance and geopolitics. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we bring you a landmark development in global trade. India and the United Kingdom have officially signed a historic free trade deal. This is an agreement set to reshape economic ties between the world's fifth and sixth largest economies. It was finalized on May the 6th, 2025, and it was formally signed today, that is July 24th, 2025. And this when the Prime Minister Narendra Modi was visiting London. He is currently in London, in fact, as we speak. And this Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA, is poised to boost bilateral trade by an estimated £25.5 billion. And that's a whopping $120 billion annually by 2040. Now, for the United Kingdom, this is the most significant deal since Brexit. And for India, well, it's a gateway to enhanced market access and economic growth. Nivendhana.
Absolutely, Sumita. In fact, British business, on the other hand, are set to gain a competitive edge in India's booming market with a huge domestic market. In fact, there's a double contribution convention exempting Indian workers in the United Kingdom from social security contribution for 3 years, and India gets to fully protect its sensitive sectors like dairy. Now, after the deal signing, Prime Minister Modi called the deal a historic milestone, and UK Prime Minister Starmer echoed this, hailing it as a landmark deal that's been the biggest and most economically significant one that Britain has made since Brexit. Let's listen in to what Prime Minister Modi and UK Prime Minister Starmer had to say.
भारतीय टेक्सटाइल, फुटवियर, जेम्स एंड ज्वेलरी, सी फूड और इंजीनियरिंग गुड्स को यूके में बेहतर मार्केट एक्सेस मिलेगा। भारत के एग्रीकल्चर प्रोड्यूस और प्रोसेस्ड फूड इंडस्ट्री के लिए यूके की मार्केट में नए अवसर बनेंगे। कॉस्ट ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस घटेगा और कॉन्फिडेंस ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस बढ़ेगा। साथ ही यूके की अर्थव्यवस्था को भारतीय स्किल्ड टैलेंट मिलेगा। इन समझौतों से दोनों देशों में निवेश बढ़ेगा और रोजगार के नए अवसर बनेंगे। पहलगाम में हुए आतंकवादी हमले की कठोर निंदा के लिए हम प्रधानमंत्री स्टारमर और उनकी सरकार का आभार व्यक्त करते हैं। हम एक मत हैं कि आतंकवाद के खिलाफ लड़ाई में दोहरे मापदंडों का कोई स्थान नहीं है। आज हमारे संबंधों में एक ऐतिहासिक दिवस है। मुझे प्रसन्नता है कि कई वर्षों की मेहनत के बाद आज दोनों देशों के बीच कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव इकोनॉमिक एंड ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट संपन्न हुआ है।
So what does this deal really mean for India? What does India gain? And how consequential is this deal for the United Kingdom as well? Let's take some of those questions to our guest who's joining us live on this broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm now joined by Richard Hilt. He is the chair at UK IBC. Thank you very much, Richard, for joining us here on ET Now. First things first, Prime Minister Starmer said that this is the most significant agreement which has been signed since the United Kingdom left the European Union. What is Prime Minister Starmer's messaging here in context of India and bilateral ties?
Right, I think the Prime Minister is probably right. We have signed free trade agreements with various countries, notably Japan and New Zealand and Australia, and also the United States. But this is certainly the most comprehensive of transactions that we have signed. It's taken 3 years to negotiate it, which in itself is remarkably fast. And at the same time, it covers 26 chapters. It covers ease of doing business, it covers visas, it covers tariffs, obviously, across a range, both Indian and the UK. And I think it's a very broad agreement between the two countries. And I think it puts the relationship between India and the UK on a very, very strong footing.
Mr. Richard, as you point that out, of course, significance in terms of global trade developments, that's the other aspect of it happening currently. How do you view that and what do you make of the same?
Well, I think it is significant because if you look at global developments, we've seen a change in approaches principally by the United States, but in terms of trade policy in general. And what you're seeing is a growth in bilateral arrangements and a strengthening of integration, if you like, of supply chains between countries where there is a significant common interest and if you like, a mutuality of strategic economic focus. So I think that in the context both of the changes that are happening in international trade, but also, if you like, the fact that we're looking at significant focus in specific sectors which are of interest, more than interest actually, of key economic sectors between the UK and India, where UK can provide certain skills and support, and India can provide certain skills and support. So there is a mutuality of interest, and I think that's very important.
Right, Richard. In fact, a very important point has been made by you, given the fact that a mutually beneficial deal has always been looked at by India. So whether it is with respect to the United Kingdom or it's related to the United States with which India is currently negotiating. But let me go back to Prime Minister Starmer's comments. He stated that a new global era which has come up, it requires us to step aside and not to stand aside. In fact, stand together instead of standing aside. Would you say that this messaging was perhaps directed at the United States?
No, again, I come back to this. Both parties did not engage in 2022 on the journey around to sign a comprehensive trade agreement in order to send a message to the United States. Indeed, President Trump was sworn in 2024, and therefore, it wasn't on the horizon, and the negotiations really haven't changed in structure and in scope since 2022. It's just taken time to arrive at the conclusions.
Absolutely, Richard. While you look at it that way, the other aspect being that double trade, in fact, $120 billion by 2030, for a long time, what do you think was holding up these deals? Was it the visa issue, or what were the other significant hoops which had to be jumped, in your opinion?
Well, I think that there is, first and foremost, negotiating an agreement of this breadth and depth, I find it quite remarkable that it has taken the length of time it has in terms of being, as short as it has. Normally, if you look at trade agreements, even bilateral trade agreements, they tend to take a considerable period of time, and you only need to look at where the EU is in its trade agreement or negotiations with India to realize that, as comprehensive as that agreement may be, that has taken a considerably longer period of time to reach a conclusion. And you may point to the negotiations that the United States is concluding with a number of its trading partners, but those are much simpler trade agreements, they rest on, effectively on one element, which is a lowering of tariffs. This, it looks at ease of doing business, it looks at migration, it looks at all sorts of social issues as well. So my view is that, yes, there have been discussions. There have been discussions around rules of origin. There have been discussions around visas and mobility. There have been discussions around the social agreements. And therefore, these are quite complicated issues which go to the heart of sovereign interests. And therefore, as I said, there are issues that have to be debated. But they've arrived at the conclusions.
Right, Richard. In fact, agreements as comprehensive as this deal has been, they do take time. And of course, there are other deals also that are taking time. The EU one particularly I'm speaking about. But let me come back to the India-UK deal. How are businesses in the United Kingdom looking at this deal, particularly with respect to market access to India's domestic market?
Well, I've just come, as you may or may not know, I've just come from the Chequers meeting at which Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Starmer, they sat down together, along, I have to say, with a large number of Indian cabinet ministers. Mr. Jaishankar was there, and Piyush Goyal was there, and on our side, our Chancellor was there, as well as a number of Home Office and health ministries. So if you look at where the benefits are falling in this, obviously everyone focuses on food and beverage as far as the UK is concerned. And this means that products from the UK in these areas will become cheaper and more available in India. And that is good. And that is good for the UK, and it's good for India as well. Likewise, as far as India is concerned, if you look at items like footwear and fabrics, textiles, pharmaceuticals, and these are areas where we're going to see even more activity and prominence given to Indian goods, reduction in prices in the UK as tariffs fall. And this will be good for Indian employment and Indian companies. And indeed, there was a statistic that I heard recently where India was estimating that there could be an increase in employment in India by 5 million, which is a very significant element.
Absolutely.
Richard, as you point that out, given the trade aspect, in terms of the current uncertain times, and the US is striking deals with countries largely considered one-sided. In that context, how important does it become for countries to strike bilateral deals, in your opinion?
Well, I think that is a very interesting comment and very insightful. I think this trade deal, let's be frank about this. This trade deal comes against the background of already very significant investment by India in the UK and very significant investment by the UK in India. Indeed, India is, in terms of FDI into the UK, is one of the leading sources of FDI. And many of your leading companies are already invested in the UK, and likewise, many of the FTSE 100 and FTSE 250 are already invested in India. So where does the benefit really fall? And I think the benefit falls in the supply chain, strengthening supply chains between our two countries. Many of the MSMEs, which are absolutely vital both for your large companies and our large companies, are not present in each other's countries. And this is the area where I think the FTA can act as a kind of catalyst to those sorts of flows. And why is that important? It's because, as you rightly say, it strengthens the bond between the two countries at a time when there are questions in relation to multilateralism. So I believe it's a really important step.
All right, Richard, thank you very much for taking the time out and speaking to us here on this very, very significant day and a significant deal which has been struck between the United States and India. Thank you very much once again for joining us on this broadcast. And ladies and gentlemen, let's now move on to the other panel which is joining us at the moment. I'm now joined by Manish Singhal. He's the Secretary General at ASSOCHAM, and Ajay Sahai is the DG and CEO at the Federation of Indian Export Organizations. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on ET. Now, let me first come to you, Manish. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, said that this is the most significant deal and a significant arrangement that's been made ever since the United Kingdom left the European Union. So how critical is this deal for the United Kingdom in that context, leaving EU, and then a significant one coming up with India?
So see, as the words say, it is significant because UK, I think, gets access to one of the largest markets in the world. And, we have a large middle class, which is growing, aspirational middle class, which would probably look for some of the products which have been allowed as imports at slightly lower duty in this FTA. So that's why it's significant. At the same time, I think UK itself has been large-hearted in giving us access to products which benefit us in terms of our employment, like just now Richard Hill was saying. It gives us employment as we are going to increase our exports in manufacturing sectors, leather, pharma, textiles, garments, and all. So I think that's why it's significant. Just to put in a short.
Right, Mr. Singhal, as you point that out, given the other aspect on a lighter note, with the fact that what Prime Minister Modi also said in the cricket analogy, talking about how this is a strong partnership. So taking that across to Mr. Sahai. Mr. Sahai, for Indian exporters, does this deal decisively tilt the pitch in our favor? Or do non-tariff barriers and regulatory hurdles still remain, in terms of, like, if you're talking about the cricket analogy, sticky wickets? And perhaps which sectors and industries, in fact, stand to benefit the most with this partnership?
In fact, this agreement is now coming at a time when we are seeing huge uncertainty in global trade. We are seeing the tariff war, and therefore it has come as a great relief to Indian industry. It's a hard negotiated free trade agreement, which is beneficial to both the sides. On the Indian side, I think this deal provide India greater market access, not only confined to the employment intensive sectors like textile, leather, gems and jewelry, toys, sports goods, food products, marine products, but also in some of the sunrise sectors like auto component, machinery, pharma. And the deal is not only confined to the trade part. In fact, if you look into India-UK trade, it is basically dominated by the services sector. And in the services also, we are getting a very good deal. We will have increasing market access, not only confined to IT and enabled services, business services, professional services like engineering, architecture, as well as in the education sector. We will see increased mobility of the professional also. And the good thing is that under the double convention, we are getting exemption for professionals. If they are working in UK for 3 years, they will not be contributing to social security, which will be a great saving. So I think since the employment intensive sector is dominated by SMEs, we will have a lot of inclusive exports happening from India, not just confined to the goods, but to the services, not only for the large scale, but more so for the micro and small industries also.
Absolutely. Micro and small industries, there is a significant parent, significant component that's been written and mentioned as part of the deal that was offered by the United Kingdom to India. But let me come to you, Manish. When you look at the fine print of this deal, India is fully protecting its sensitive sectors, including dairy, vegetables, apples, cooking oil, and the like. So in your opinion, do you think this sends a clear signal to the United States that certain red lines cannot be crossed and will not be crossed on sensitive sectors when it comes to the sectors that India is sensitive about?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, it's not only a message to United States, but also to European Union, which is probably the next big deal we are likely to sign, because those red lines become very clear. And at the same time, I think we should also look at this from the point of view that United States, whatever deal happens, is going to be much more restricted one, while this one is much more uh, all-encompassing. Yes, our red lines are very clearly honored by UK. And at the same time, we are getting access to, some agriculture products on the other hand, like millets, which will benefit our agriculture community, and even things like Ayurveda and all. So it's a much wider deal. We've got, IPR protection. We've got rules of origin norms, which are included out here. And at the same time, I think very, very few NTBs, that is non-tariff barriers, which have been agreed to. So this is going to be a much, much comprehensive deal, and that's why Prime Minister Starmer calls it very significant. And I think not really a true comparison with US deal, but yes, message is being sent, no doubt.
All right, the message is loud and clear, but let me get in a word from you, Mr. Sahai, given circling back to what we were discussing earlier, the services sector, like you mentioned, and that has gained ground, 1,800 annual visas for different sectors, of course, and a social security waiver for 75,000 Indian professionals. But are these real wins or symbolic sweeteners in a deal that is still heavily tilted towards goods?
I'm not sure on that, because when I'm looking into the trend of India's export to UK, so far it has been driven by the services more. Roughly, if you look into the trade, 58% is contributed by services, 42% by the goods. Though, of course, now with tariff on the goods coming down to zero, there is more opportunity which will come into the goods sector. And I'm also looking into a kind of value chain being established between the two sides also. We have to look into what way the SMEs of the two sides, they integrate with the large industry on both the sides. On the services front, I'm pretty sure that there will be huge opportunity coming through the joint venture and the investment also. We know that UK is very strong in financial services. We are setting up the financial services in the gift city. Probably most of the joint venture come into that. In the legal services, though of course we have little restrictions so far as the legal services are concerned, but we are seeing that much of the work flowing from the UK, off-court work flowing from the UK to India, and these kind of partnership will stabilize. Let also please look into that. 70% of the US services export to India is in the form of tourism. And that's why we feel that this kind of agreement will help us in establishing people-to-people contact. This is not just a trade agreement. UK is a very strategic partner of India. And we want these kind of people-to-people contact to cement these kinds of ties further.
Absolutely, sir. And let me come back to you, Manish, and go back to the point that you mentioned. And you said that the EU deal is likely to get signed. When I asked you about the deal with the United States, were you alluding to the fact that perhaps the EU deal could happen before we actually strike a mini deal with the United States? Because negotiations with the European Union are also currently on.
See, just let me correct you here. I mean, I didn't say EU deal is going to be signed soon. What I meant was that EU deal is going to be next. Which happens first, it's anybody's guess. But really, we signed the FTA deal earlier, and it's going to be effective from 1st October. Then on top of it, we have UK now. So I'm only saying it is going to really show the way for the EU deal. Also, let's understand EU is a set of countries which all have to approve a deal before it really gets signed. So it's a bit more complex there. But yes, EU will surely get a message that what are the red lines for India, and where India is much more open and reciprocal in the whole process.
As you pointed out, Mr. Singhal, ratification is still pending in the UK Parliament. And do you foresee any resistance from British trade unions or, political lobbies, especially given this is Prime Minister Starmer's first major trade move?
See, this deal has been in the works for over 2 years, where there's been a regime change both in UK and in India. So I really don't see any political hindrances in approval of this deal, and I'm sure there would be a in principle buy-in and agreement, however informal it is, before this deal was even signed, in the presence of both the prime ministers. So that's not a mean deal, and I'm sure the parliaments in both the countries are going to welcome this deal and support the government on this.
Right. Manish, let me also ask you about the current uncertain environment that we are currently operating in. The United States is striking deals with countries that are largely considered one-sided. In that context, how important does it become for countries to strike these individual deals, these FTAs, and to what extent do these individual deals that countries are now signing cushion them against major trade disruptions?
See, these bilateral deals are important because number one, it's helping India at least to diversify its risk. When I say diversify its risk, it's obviously that God forbid things don't go the way we want with the United States, then at least we are opening doors with all these FTAs. We started with Australia and UAE a couple of years back, and then now we have the FTA deal. And let's say with UK, I think we have also sent a message to the whole world that we are first of all open for business. Of course, we are looking at tying up or agreeing with these agreements with the more developed economies, because that's where Indian industry benefits a lot, both in terms of exports and also in terms of imbibing newer technologies and partnerships on innovation and R&D also. So United States, like I said, is a restricted deal. So while it happens or not, I'm sure this is going to start opening doors for India.
Absolutely. And as you talk about that aspect, Mr. Sahal, let me quickly come to you. Vision 2035 lays out collaboration in defense, climate innovation, education, healthcare. But beyond the diplomatic headlines as well, can this roadmap catalyze, long-term investment and joint ventures as well, in your opinion, going ahead?
No, definitely. I think we will be seeing much investment flowing in. That the government has also said that they are opening the investment, and all the any government procurement also above 2,000 million will be open to the UK companies. Also, we are seeing increasing interest of UK also in India. I'm pretty sure a lot of partnership will be built. Not only in these sector, we are looking more into the green energy sector, non-renewable sector, defense, aviation, and we are opening all these sectors. As of now, there is no restriction, no FDI restriction on these sectors. And with these kinds of conducive environment which has been created to the free trade agreement, I'm pretty sure a lot of investment will happen. It will not just be an investment in India. A lot of Indian companies have already invested heavily in the UK, and that trend will continue, maybe accelerated with this free trade agreement.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on ET Now and sharing your perspectives on that big deal that was signed today. It was a historic deal, definitely, for the United Kingdom, which has not signed any significant deal after Brexit. At least that's the word that came in from Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And of course, it's an important one for India as well, given the fact that duties from the United Kingdom have been brought down to as low as 99%, in fact, in most of the cases. Thank you very much, gentlemen, once again, for sharing your perspectives on how this deal really catalyzes trade between both the sides and the impact that it's going to have on Indian industry. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for us to slip into a very short break, but